Today we're going to make chili relleno burritos. This is going to be really good. On top of the fact that we're going to have freshly made, homemade chili rellenos, we're also going to do some of our homemade refried beans and Mexican rice. Let's get started. All right, so for these chili rellenos, first ingredient you're going to need above all else is poblano or pasilla peppers. You technically could use other types of peppers if you want, but these are what are traditionally used, and personally this is my favorite anyway because they typically are bigger, you can fit more in them, and they're just fantastic. So start with that. Then you're going to need some kind of cheese. You can use pretty much anything you have available realistically. Typically, I would use Monterey Jack. I don't actually have any on hand. I've also tried doing it with Pepper Jack, and that worked just fine. But in this case, I'm going to use some Colby Jack because I have a bunch of this on hand, and I think it will be really good. I'm sure it would be good with cheddar or even Swiss or heck, probably mozzarella. You could even maybe try doing it with cream cheese. I've never tried doing that, but we're trying to keep it as close to authentic as possible. So we're going to do some cheese in there. For coating the peppers, you're going to need a little bit of flour. You really don't need very much. I just happen to have this big bag here at the moment. And then you're going to need 3 large eggs. What we're going to be doing with those eggs is we will separate the whites and the yolks, and we'll whip up the whites first, and then we'll add the yolks one at a time so that we can actually get that perfect fluffy coating for the peppers. And then to go with that, we're also going to be making our own salsa roja. So this is going to be kind of a mixture of fresh and canned ingredients. So we're going to be using a can of Rotel tomatoes. If I had more than one can, I would actually just use these, but I also happen to have a fresh tomato on hand, so I'm going to use that as well as part of it. Then going to add some onion, probably going to use about 1/4 of one of these. Some fresh cilantro, and then some dried granulated garlic, some salt, some cumin, and then just a dash of chipotle chili powder. Now, of course, you can use regular chili powder. It will work just as well. This is going to be a bit of a savory, spicy, smoky kind of sauce, but it's going to go really well with these. All right, now additionally, just to let you know what ingredients you're going to need for the beans and the rice. For the beans, you're of course going to need a couple cans of pinto beans. You can do this with black beans. It will work just as well, but for our purposes, we're going to do it with pinto beans to make the refried beans. Then you're also going to need 1 yellow onion, typically like a small to medium one for this many cans would be perfect. I also want to make note real quickly here. I'm doing 2 cans right now just because of the fact that I'm actually making this for more than just the burritos. But if you're just making enough so that you have basically enough for the burrito plus a little bit extra, you just do 1 can and then half an onion. So keep that in mind. You'll also need some granulated garlic. You can use fresh garlic if you prefer, but I typically use granulated when I'm making the beans. Then you're going to need some ground cumin, not very much of it. And you're going to need some chili powder as well. And you'll use probably more of this than you will of most of the other ingredients, but it will still be important to have. So that's what you need for the beans. And then for the rice, you are, of course, first and foremost going to need some kind of rice. I'm using basmati rice. I've done it with jasmine. You can do it with regular white rice. Doesn't really matter what kind you use. You could even do it with minute rice, and it works perfectly fine. And then you're going to need the chicken tomato bouillon. This is something that is absolutely essential as far as I'm concerned. My original recipe, as I will link down in the description below, in that one I say, if you've never made this rice before, it's a good idea to add the bouillon at the very end after the rice is cooked. If you've made it before, you probably know about how much you need, so you can easily add it to the water beforehand, before the rice cooks, and then it'll just blend in perfectly ahead of time. And lastly, completely optional, but it does add a little bit of extra flavor, is some butter. That just kind of helps with the creaminess for the rice. So that's, I mean, you're really only using a couple tablespoons for an entire batch of rice. So that's all you're going to need for making the beans and rice. Now, for the sake of this recipe, I'm not actually going to be putting together the beans and rice on the video. You can actually find the recipe to that link down in the description below. That will go over all of the steps that you need to do. None of it is complicated, but it's well worth doing if you want to. However, you can just as easily do prefab refried beans like out of a can. You can get some of those easy packets where all you have to do is basically add water for making rice. You could probably even find some other form of Mexican rice that you can use. It's entirely optional to make it from scratch. I like doing it from scratch because I prefer it that way. I already have some Mexican rice made up, so I'm just going to use that, and then I will make up the beans myself, even though it won't be on this video. But the chili relleno is going to be the big focus of this particular video. All right, so to prep our poblanos, first thing you're going to need is a baking sheet lined with aluminum foil. And then go ahead and get your oven on the high broiler setting. Put your rack on the very top because these are gonna go directly under the heat. So we're just gonna put our poblanos directly onto here. You don't necessarily obviously have to do this many at a time. I am doing a bunch of them because of the fact that I'm making it for multiple people, as well as because of the fact that, you know, I just want to. I love these things, and it's so worth the extra effort. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And I just remembered to wash them, so I just went ahead and did that off camera. But like I said, get your oven rack, your top oven rack up to the very top spot in there. And then you want your oven, your broiler preheated to high. And then once that's all ready to go, you'll just put these under, you'll do it for 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, flip them over and cook them for an additional 5 minutes on that same setting. And then once we are done with that, then we'll get to the next step. All right, and while those are in the oven, we're gonna go ahead and get our cheese cut up. So basically the idea here is that you want to do it in basically cheese stick size pieces, because the idea is that we don't know exactly how many are going to fit in each one. And with those peppers, they're going to shrink quite a bit probably after they've fully cooked and then had a chance to soften. So you just want to cut up a decent amount. Basically, you can figure probably it's going to be roughly about 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce per pepper, depending on the size. It may be more or less, but really you can kind of just guesstimate on it. Really the important thing is it's not going to, if you find out that you don't quite have enough initially, it's not that big of a deal, because it's really not until you're actually putting them together that it's going to matter. So even if they come out of the oven and you don't have it all chopped up, or you need a little bit extra, it's very easy to get more as you need it. All right, I think we're good on that. Now we'll go ahead and get our onion chopped up. And for the salsa roja, you don't really need very much. You're only using about 1/4 of an onion. But for the actual, I mean, we'll go ahead and chop up the onion we need for the refried beans as well. All right, and then we'll chop up our tomato as well. Just do that as more of a rough chop because it doesn't have to be perfect since it's going to go in the blender anyway. Cilantro, we'll just pull out some of it. Probably actually a little too much, but pull out just a little bit. All right, and then we'll get everything in our blender and get it all blended first. All right, so into the blender, we're gonna go ahead and first put in our full can of Rotel tomatoes, minus the lid. And we'll toss everything else in directly. The reason why you want to do all this before you actually warm anything up is because of the fact that it's just going to be much easier to get the flavors to meld properly if you do the blending first. So we're going to do that, and then we'll add some garlic powder. You really just want to put like a dash of it. You can go more generous if you want. I did roughly about half a teaspoon. And then we're going to do roughly about a quarter teaspoon of ground cumin. I guess I could just pull this off of here. And then we'll do just maybe about a quarter teaspoon of chipotle chili powder. Actually, probably closer to like 1/8 of a teaspoon. And then we'll add really just a dash of salt. A couple small shakes. And we blend. All right, the final result looks basically just like salsa. So this is gonna be really good. All that and the extra flavors in there, the cumin and the chipotle chili powder and all that, it's just gonna come out really, really good. So we will go ahead and get this on the stove top, and then we'll simmer it on low while we get everything else ready. All right, they're out of the oven now, so we're gonna cover them with aluminum foil for about 5 minutes so they have a chance to soften. All right, the peppers have been sitting for a bit. They've had a chance to cool down, as has the pan. So at this point, what you want to do is start peeling off the blackened skin. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just get as much of it peeled off as you can. And rather than throwing out that skin, we're actually going to chop it up and add it to our sauce, our salsa roja, because that will give a little bit of extra flavor that you wouldn't get otherwise. You want to do this very gently because these things are going to be really fragile after they've softened for a bit. All right, we're going to just quickly, we'll make sure that all these poblanos are out of the way real quick, and then we're going to just chop up what we have for the poblano skin, because we can use that for the salsa roja. All right, so now we're ready to get these peppers started preparing. So first thing you want to do is very gently cut a slit in the top of the pepper. And then using a spoon, you're going to want to try to get as much of those seeds out as you can. You might think, oh, well, this will add extra spice if I leave them in, but really it just gives you something to chew on, and it doesn't really like improve things at all. I find that even though these things are typically kind of mild, the salsa roja that we made, particularly because of the chipotle chili powder, is going to be plenty spicy enough to where you're really not going to need any extra spice from the seeds. But like I said, the big thing is just that these are not fun to chew on. They just become really annoying really fast. So we're going to try to get as much of those out as we can, but still leave as much of the membranes intact as possible. You may end up with it getting slightly punctured, but you just got to do the best you can with what you got. Unfortunately, that's one thing that is kind of tricky about these sometimes, is just getting them just right without completely demolishing them, but it's still going to be really good, and that's what matters. So do that, and then get some cheese to put in there, and basically just fit whatever you can in there. That's why we cut them into smaller pieces. I made the mistake of cutting them too big before, and then you just end up not really being able to get it closed up. So want to put a decent amount in there. That's probably enough, a couple sticks for that. And then we'll use some toothpicks to seal that shut as best as we can. I'll just use a couple of toothpicks. Basically just to kind of hold it together. We can pull those out later, but the main thing is that we don't want to have as much spillage as we might have otherwise when it comes to cooking these, because since we're going to be frying them, there is a chance that you could end up having the cheese spill out. So once that's taken care of, we'll just set it aside and then do the next one. And rinse and repeat with all of them. All right, and now that all of our peppers are prepped, more or less, some of them are kind of falling apart a little more than others. I probably let them sit a little bit too long. But anyway, now that they're prepped, what we're gonna do is we're going to coat them in flour. So right here I have half a cup of flour as well as half a teaspoon of salt, just all mixed together. So we're gonna go ahead and get these coated as best as we can and just kind of do it as gently as we can. Get them reasonably well coated so that the egg mixture has something to stick to. It's not going to be perfect, but it shouldn't matter too much because it's still going to end up really good. So we'll just stick them right back on the tray after taking care of that. The idea here is that we're actually going to coat these before we put together the egg white batter, because that separates pretty quickly. So, or if you let it sit too long, it will separate. So we'll just kind of get that coated and then gently tap to get rid of the excess flour. After we finish coating these, we'll get together our egg batter mixture, and then we'll also get the oil started for getting that heated up to actually properly fry these bad boys. We may end up with a little bit of spillage, but I think it's gonna be all right. Something that I thought of that may end up being a potential useful tip in the future is getting these prepped beforehand minus the batter and then just freezing them. And then next time you want to make them, you can just very easily make up the egg batter mixture, and then all you got to do is fry them up, and it shouldn't take too much effort. All right, so that's all we're gonna do with that. Now let's get together the egg white mixture. All right, now for this next step, we need to separate the egg whites and the yolks. So we're going to do a large bowl for the egg whites and then do a smaller bowl for the yolks. We're doing 3 large eggs for this. All right, and then we're going to whip the egg whites on high until stiff peaks form. All right, that looks about good. It's not moved around anymore. At this point, we want to start adding our egg yolks, and mine are kind of like all amalgamated together, so I'm going to do my best to do one at a time, but we will start whisking those in as little at a time as we can until everything's fully mixed. All right, now that they're fully mixed, we're ready to get started with the frying. All right, now when it comes to the frying process, you want to have roughly around 4 cups of cooking oil. In this case, I actually have, it's about half beef tallow and the other half is avocado oil, only because I didn't have quite enough beef tallow. But you want to get it up to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have one of these handy infrared thermometers, they're super useful for checking to see where you're at. And right now we're at about temperature. So the idea here is that you want to take your pepper that you have coat it in flour, dip it in the batter, get it well coated, and then drop it in. And if you're anything like me, you're probably going to end up with it being more of a mess than you would prefer, but it's just going to come out really good, so it won't matter too much. Just don't overcrowd the pan. Don't put more than 2 or 3 if they're small in the pan at any given time. And just give it basically 3 to 5 minutes per side, depending on how big they are. It can take a little bit longer sometimes. Basically, the goal is to have them golden brown on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and get all these fried up, and then we'll get to the rest of it. All right, now to assemble this burrito, we're going to start off with our big old tortilla. You probably do this with a smaller one, you just won't be able to fit as much in there. Then we'll add some of our homemade refried beans, some Mexican rice, finally one of our chili rellenos, which we'll go ahead and get that stem out. Then we'll roll it up, cut it in half, and then top it with some of our salsa roja. And now the taste test.
That looks amazing. Don't know where to start. What else in here?
It's beans, rice, the chili relleno, and then the sauce on top.
Some of everything. This looks very pretty.
Yeah, the taste is what really matters. I probably, in hindsight, should have left off the salsa on top for the sake of making it possible to eat with your hands, but you know.
No, it's good. The sauce on top completes the whole thing, so.
I just meant more in terms of being able to eat it with your hands, but.
Yeah, but no, the flavor is very good.
All right, let's give this a shot. Make sure we get some of the beans in there for sure. That's very important as far as I'm concerned. It's like #1 priority for me, apart from the chili relleno itself. All right. Oh my goodness. Wow. See, I've never done that before. I've never done a chili relleno inside a burrito. I think I saw Sam the Cooking Guy do it once, and then I've heard of it a couple other places. Man, that is really good. Absolutely. Make chili rellenos. Doesn't matter if you make the homemade beans and rice or not, but make the chili relleno and stick it in a burrito if you want something more than just the relleno by itself. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel and share with your friends, and stay tuned for more recipes that, while not necessarily authentic, are always delicious. And then for coating the actual, a jar of if we're not being outsmarted by the toothpick container. Make the chili relleno and stick it in a burrito if you want something more than just the relleno by itself. Thanks for